Very good. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. on October the 15th, 2025. Can we take the Pledge of Allegiance? Commissioner Wasserman, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll conduct the roll call.
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco,
Here.
Commissioner Reese,
Present.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Present.
and Vice Chair Chaco.
Present. And it's now time for the Planning Director's report.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. So your next regular meeting will be October 29th, where we will be bringing the development agreements for the large format digital displays on the 3rd Street Promenade and at Santa Monica Place. We will also be bringing forward the digital signage ordinance, although the Planning Commission is not required to take a formal action or make a formal recommendation on the sign ordinance. It is being brought for discussion purposes for the commission, just to provide context to the development agreements. So that is all happening on the 29th. In addition to that, you'll also be reviewing your annual report from the last year and establishing the work plan for the subsequent year. At the moment, we have no items on the November 5th and November 19th meeting. We're not canceling those meetings as yet, as we just want to make sure, that we have no available items, on those meetings. But Ethan will reach out, on meeting schedule. For the Architecture Review Board, at the October 6th meeting, there were 3 projects reviewed. 2 were approved and 1 was continued. 1437 Lincoln and 2901 Santa Monica Boulevard, both of those are housing projects, were approved, and 1399 Olympic was continued. At the November 3rd meeting, so next month's meeting, is the review of the 1320 Pico Boulevard project. That is also a housing project. At the Landmarks Commission, October 13th meeting, which was just this past Monday, the commission denied the designation or potential designation of 26 Arcadia Terrace and approved a certificate of appropriateness for 451 San Vicente Boulevard. At City Council, a lot has happened since the commission last met. So at the September 30th meeting, the council heard or held a discussion on the HPP Offsite Affordable Housing Pilot Program. As we shared at your last meeting, that pilot program was initiated at the August 12th meeting and due to terminate on September 30th. So at that meeting, council received a status update on the program. We did receive 6 applications totaling 1,000 units. So the initial objectives of the pilot program were met in terms of spurring interest, and moving forward housing projects. So there are about 30 projects representing about 3,000 units remaining. Council gave direction to return with an ordinance to allow those remaining previously approved projects to participate in this program, in addition to direction on various aspects of the program, with a focus around, for example, the gap financing amount, which was a point of discussion of this Planning Commission, and also providing more certainty in the development of the affordable units by requiring milestones. So that's due to return. We anticipate to council probably the November 18th meeting, but that's all being worked on at the moment. At the September 30th meeting, council also adopted the triennial update to the California Building Code. So that's now going through the process getting into adoption, and it'll take effect January 1 of 2026. There were also 2 map amendments that were correcting, apparent errors at 2644 30th Street and 1331 Wilshire Boulevard. And then at the October 14th meeting, which was just last night, the council, just on those map amendments, they did adopt second reading for both of those map amendments, and also accepted a voluntary agreement from the property owner of 2644 30th Street, recording restrictions on redevelopment on the portions of that site, including the parking lot and the building, for 10 years. So council accepted that agreement. There was a signature events resolution, which is part of an overall effort to memorialize sort of these signature events, where fees have been waived over the years, and sort of just formalizing, these known events, large events that happen on a regular basis each year in the city or on a biennial basis, and waiving fees for those. So it just provides more predictability for those events. And it's part of a broader effort to, look at spurring more events in the city. And then finally, the council heard or gave direction on the extension request of the exclusive negotiating agreement for the Civic Auditorium reuse. Council gave direction to not extend the ENA, and also directed staff to study, all the potential options for the site with and without constraints. So it really is coming back with additional study. It wasn't a direction to do anything. It doesn't. It really is allows the city more flexibility to have other folks come in. There was a lot of discussion from the council around, wanting to bring back a concert venue, and so very much I think that idea is still alive, and it's just opening up, for other parties who may be interested as well. At the October 28th meeting, which will be upcoming, there'll be the contract adoption for Mills Act. There's 3 new contracts this year. And there'll also be an update to the outdoor dining fee. So these are the sidewalk dining rates. There's an effort to streamline and simplify those rates. And also an IZO that's going that day to remove some design standards, just so that we have all the design guidelines in one place, which are adopted design guidelines. And then finally, just giving for the commission's awareness, on the October 28th meeting, the city manager will be presenting the year-end budget and organizational realignment plan. That's a effort that's been underway for, probably the last couple months or so, in terms of, redefining mission and values and purpose. So there'll be a rollout of the broader organizational realignment plan around strategic objectives related to public safety, economic opportunity, and housing. I wanted to highlight for you just a couple things that the department is working on that we received direction on with respect to a vacant property registration ordinance and rent registry. So those ordinances will be coming forward on October 28th. Largely work carried out by our Code Enforcement Division. On the rent registry, that's a partnership with Housing and Human Services and also the Rent Control Board staff. On the development process, we've mentioned this before, that the city's in the process of implementing a new land management system. However, software doesn't address sort of, process. So there is work very much underway and in earnest in reviewing the city's overall development process from, what that experience is like for a customer, from sort of the preliminary work through entitlement, plan check, and then into construction, all the way through. We're really taking a top to bottom look at that in concert with the new land management system. So those are all, that's sort of highlights of some of the things, the department is working on. And then we also want to note that we're currently have initiated the 5-year comprehensive fee study. This is an opportunity organization-wide to review the city's cost recovery fees. So that work has commenced, and it's ongoing and will be, ongoing for the next few months in time for next year's budget. So that's my report. Have any questions?
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Commissioners, do any of you have questions? Start with Commissioner Fresco.
What's the name of the new computer system? Because I keep hearing people refer to a thing and I wonder, is that a new system?
Oh, yeah. So the software itself is called Clarity with
That's
an
what
I.
I keep
Yeah.
hearing, that word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to.
Clarity?
Clarity. Yeah. CLARITI. Yep. Yeah.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Yeah, real quick, at the very top, the development agreements for next meeting, are they 4 different development agreements, or, because there's 4 addresses, or is it 1, or?
4 separate, yeah. Sorry, my eyes are like going on me right now, but yeah, okay. It's 4, yeah. 4, right? Okay. Yeah.
Any further questions? Great. The next item on our agenda is Planning Commissioner announcements. To begin with, some general procedural issues regarding speakers. If anybody wishes to speak on an agenda item, you must submit a speaker's request form that looks something like this to the Commission Secretary, who sits on my left. And all requests to address the Commission on public hearing items must be submitted to the Commission's consideration before that item actually comes up. Okay, the next item is regarding public input. Actually, before I proceed to the next item, do any of the commissioners have any announcements? Great. The next item is on public input. Public input is permitted only on items that are public input is permitted only on items that are not on the agenda, that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. And state law prohibits this body from taking any actions on items that are not listed on the agenda, including issues raised under this general public input item. We can now move on to the consent calendar. Commissioners, I do have a speaker's request on item 7B, but before we take action on that, do any of you wish to pull any other items off the consent agenda? No. Do I have a motion and a second for pulling item 7B from the agenda?
I move to pull 7B from the consent calendar and in the same breath, move 7A, C, and D.
I'll second that.
Great. We have a motion by Commissioner Reese and a second by Commissioner Wasserman to take item 7B off the consent agenda and to move the remaining 2 items, 7A, 7, was it just 7A, Commissioner Reese?
No, 7A, C, and D. I was.
A, C, and D. Okay. So Commissioner Reese moves and Commissioner Wasserman seconds, moving items A, C, and D as well. Great.
And we could do that as a voice vote for the approval of the consent items. So all in favor say aye.
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 All in opposition? I hear none. So 7A, C, and D are approved.
Commissioners, can I ask that we waive the staff report on this and go right to public testimony?
So move.
We have can we get a second?
I move. Don't we have to vote on it to waive it?
He's looking for a second. She said, so I think she's second.
Oh, great. All right. So Commissioner Reese moved,
Did you
Commissioner
make a motion? Okay.
Reese moved, and Commissioner Fresco seconded that we waive the staff report for item 7B.
We can do that as voice vote as well. So all in Agreement?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposition? I hear none.
All right. So,
And we should do ex parte discussion since we're pulling that item.
great. So commissioners, do any of you have ex parte discussions on this?
I do not.
There are no ex parte discussions. Great. So we can move on to the public comment then?
I guess before public comment, we should see if there's a I know you waived the staff presentation, but if there's an applicant presentation,
Very good. Is there an applicant presentation?
looks like not.
It's always good to ask.
So then, yeah, we can now move to public comment.
Very good. So we have one request for public comment from, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Bert Hilkes? Very good. You can come forward to speak. You'll see a timer on the podium that will give you 3 minutes
Thank you.
to speak.
So I hope I have it right. This is with regard to the construction that's planned for 1527 17th Street. Is that correct, 7D? Yes. So I just wanted to voice my concern because we live in the building owned by the same people who are proposing the construction immediately adjacent and to the south. And our building is orientated such that our living rooms and our kitchens are facing the construction. So it's a long, skinny, single-story building. And we have California windows, which are circa 50s windows that with the slats. So our concern is that there's going to be, the last time this was approved, we were told it would take 18 months from beginning to end to start with the digging and all this and the moving of the current structure. So we're expecting 18 months of a lot of noise and pollution and a lot of trucks in the alley and in the street. We're separated from this property by only about 16 feet, a very skinny lawn. And frankly, I'm also concerned and annoyed that apparently this developer looks for properties like this where they're going to be protecting a building, and so thereby they get around certain bylaws and rules about how close they can construct to the edges of the property or how high they can construct the building. So it's going to be much taller than they're allowed to usually make it. So they're allowed to get a lot around all of these rules. So we're going to get a very large structure right in front of our windows at the end of the 18 months of noise. That's going to be basically blocking us. There's going to be a sound tunnel between us and 16 feet away at this building. And so it's going to be a lot of hardship for us. And then at the end, we're going to have this thing that's going to be blocking the sun. So I've come to voice my concern about that and my dismay that this is being put upon us, and at the end of it all, we just lose what used to be in front of our living room windows, which was sky. And I was wondering, I don't know much about how this works, but it seems to me that we could be due some kind of compensation for the period during which there is this construction, and while we have to put up with all this noise. It's my experience that even though in a loose kind of way, construction's not supposed to start until 8 o'clock in the morning, I believe it is. What does happen is that these big trucks that are diesels, and they run their engines, they don't turn them off, will come and stage, and in their parking, they will, when they back up, they beep. So we've been woken up by the building behind us whenever they're doing something big, the business behind us, with trucks that come at 6 o'clock in the morning, because that doesn't seem to be part of the rule. So we're expecting a lot of disruption, and we don't know in what way we may be able to be compensated for that. Or so that's what I wanted to say. It's going to be hard for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the speaker? Does the applicant have a rebuttal on this?
I don't think they're here.
No. Thank you. Any commission discussion?
Well, I'll discuss that. I'll start with just saying that, I feel for your pain. Construction is never easy in any stretch of the imagination. But as I understand this project, it is completely within the code, and that we do incentivize the protection of structures of merit. And because of that, the city has crafted a zoning code that allows for incentives to do that. And part of those incentives is to maintain the existing building, and in exchange, you get some benefit. So from the city's standpoint, we're not only getting new units, but we're also getting a protected unit. I'm sorry, we're getting a historic, a landmark building.
Structure of merit.
So those are important considerations to the city, and that's why we've created that ordinance. In terms of construction noise, they do have rules they have to live by. And you should be part of that will be they have to provide you contact information. And you should be very willing to use that and hold their feet to the fire that they're good neighbors. And I know that's probably not really helpful to you, but we don't have a ton of discretion in this situation because this project meets the code.
May I move?
Yes, Commissioner Fresco?
I would like to move item 7B on the consent calendar.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Fresco and a second by Commissioner Reese.
So is the recommendation to, the staff's recommendation to approve the map
Yes.
and the CEQA findings? Okay, so Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Chaco.
Yes. The next item on our agenda is item 8, that's the study session.
While she's getting ready, I want y'all to know I paid my earthquake insurance today.
That is the best introduction I could have. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Call. I serve as the Chief Resilience Officer for the Office of Emergency Management. Thank you for having me tonight to present on our 2025 Local Hazard Mitigation Plan update. So forgive me, I'm not a planner. I'm an emergency manager by trade. Our Office of Emergency Management team is within the City Manager's office currently, and it consists of 2 divisions, so Public Safety Communications, our consolidated 911 dispatch center for police, fire, and EMS dispatching and call taking, and our Emergency Services and Preparedness team that is responsible for the emergency response and preparedness plans, our disaster cache, and our Emergency Operations Center. So what is the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan? Well, this is a very important plan, especially for 2 reasons. Number one, the planning process is multidisciplinary and where it really educates city staff and community stakeholders on our local hazards and risks. It really raises awareness of both city staff, stakeholders, and the community, and provides a synopsis on what are the natural hazards that Santa Monica needs to be prepared for. It also identifies community priorities. How are we going to address these risks? What is our plan to reduce them? And then it also meets important FEMA requirements so that we are eligible for different types of hazard mitigation funding that is not disaster related. One part of this plan is once it is approved, it has to be approved by both Cal OES and FEMA. Once we complete FEMA approval process, it will be serve as an appendix to the safety element as well. So again, this has been a large team effort. We had a resilience planning committee that consisted of both city departments and city stakeholders, including our local hospitals, other jurisdiction emergency management agencies, business stakeholders, et cetera, so that everyone really had a stake in this plan, understood what the hazards that are in Santa Monica, what the hazard scenarios are, and then collectively work together to figure out what the mitigation action items would be and how we should prioritize those. It has been a long road. So we started this plan every 5 years. You're required to do a hazard mitigation plan update. And our last plan was updated in 2016. We planned to revise it in 2020, and then, a little thing called COVID happened. So we have been on this road since 2023. One of the important elements to this plan is community participation. So in partnership with Community Development Department, we conducted a public survey to gather feedback from community members on what hazards they find most concerning, what is their level of preparedness. We conducted public workshops. Department experts were involved in reviewing the different chapters of the plan. And we have just closed our public comment period. Again, once council adopts the plan, it will go to Cal OES and FEMA for review. We don't know what the turnaround time will be with FEMA at the current state, so TBD. Oh, and one other piece of this is that after we complete the FEMA approval and we adopt those changes, we also are engaging in a project where this is a very large, complicated document, and it's not very user-friendly for the average member of the public. And so taking this document and turning it into kind of a magazine style format, available in 6 different languages, and a website that really explain the hazards that exist, the mitigation items, and how people should prepare for disaster. It's also been a bumpy road since 2023. We've had lots of natural hazards occur during the planning process and writing process we're a very tiny team in OEM on the emergency services and preparedness side. So it has been a balancing act of planning and response. The biggest challenge was the January 2025 Palisades fire, which was a very large response and recovery effort from OEM and also required the rewrite of 2 of our hazard mitigation chapters, as well as our hazard chapters, and also a rewrite of our hazard mitigation actions to ensure we were incorporating wildfire. So again, it's a big document. It's 3 different volumes: our action plan, what we have done, our update from the 2016 mitigation action items, what we're planning to do now, and then volume 2 is a chapter on every hazard that we identified. We were working in alignment with CDD to make sure that our hazards aligned with the safety element. We also used the same consultant to try to streamline the process, speed this planning process up as much as possible, so that we could be quickly eligible for grant funding. And then volume 3 is our appendices. There's many resources, maps available in that section. One thing to note that confuses a lot of folks is this is not an emergency response plan. It is specifically, it has to meet very specific FEMA requirements, and it is meant to take a look at every hazard and assess the risk, present potential scenarios, but it doesn't dictate how to respond to those. That is not its purpose. We do have a lot of emergency operations plans within the city. We have a overall multi-hazard functional emergency response plan. And then we also have tsunami plan, peer emergency, civil unrest, alert and warning, crisis communications, department procedures. So there's many different plans that guide our response activities. This document helps us learn about what need to be the priorities, what it should be our next plan that we write related to response. Okay, So I will move into the hazard analysis findings. So our greatest risk of the hazards that were studied are earthquake, tsunami, wildland fire, flood inundation due to the Stone Canyon Dam failure, if that failed, severe weather, and sea level rise. The lower risk was coastal flooding, landslides, structure fires, hazardous materials release, and airport crashes. How did we come to these findings? So FEMA has a GIS risk assessment tool called HAZIS that we ran these scenarios through. It only is available for earthquake, tsunami, hurricane, and floods. It is not available for wildfire or extreme heat, sea level rise. So these scenarios that we received from HAZIS were presented to the Resilience Committee so that we could really understand what would be the impacts if the worst case scenario of these events occurred. We also have a damage assessment tool used by OEM and CDD called Crisis Track that we can estimate property loss of a disaster using tax assessor information. And so that was also used to complement HAZIS, and especially when it wasn't available for a specific hazard like wildfire. And all of these estimates only are looking at Santa Monica impacts. So for example, the San Andreas fault scenario is just looking at Santa Monica, not the entire region. Okay, so for earthquake, we looked at 4 different scenarios, again, with a very large earthquake occurring on all of these faults. The Santa Monica, Newport, Inglewood, Palos Verdes fault, which is the tsunami scenario, where the local earthquake would prompt a local tsunami, and then the southern San Andreas fault shakeout scenario, which is tomorrow. So for our earthquake risk analysis, the largest damage estimate was for the Santa Monica fault scenario. And that is because the fault would be in our own backyard with tremendous shaking, fault rupture, and the highest possibility for landslides or liquefaction occurring within Santa Monica. As the fault, as the distance increases between the fault and the city, the risk and the damage level decreases. So for San Andreas, we always think of that as our worst case scenario, but actually the estimated injuries and economic loss is significantly less. However, and this is a big however, it doesn't take into account the regional impacts. What kind of damage could it do to trade or our transportation routes and things coming into the city, even though our structures may be standing and things like that. This just shows the distribution of residential building loss based on the earthquake scenarios. Again, it focuses on where the fault is and the direction of likely travel of the earthquake waves into the city. And similarly, this is the commercial building loss estimate for each earthquake scenario. More good news. Tsunami is our next hazard that we're looking at. There are 2 different types of tsunami. Local source tsunami, which is a seismic event that occurs nearby and it prompts an immediate tsunami. And then a long distance tele-tsunami, which is similar to the one we just had a month ago, 2 months ago, where an earthquake is occurring or an underwater seismic event is occurring far away, and then we have a few hours to prepare for the tsunami event. So this is the statewide tsunami inundation map that looks at a tele-tsunami occurring with the origin in Alaska and a 20-foot run-up to the north of the pier. It goes up to Pacific Coast Highway, but unlike the movie San Andreas, it does not go over the bluffs and into West Los Angeles and all of that, or to downtown. And then south of the pier, it really impacts our park areas and beachfront parking lots. There are condos to the south of the city that could be impacted. And we used HAZUS again to do the tsunami risk analysis with this showing our exposed population casualties and estimated damage to buildings. One thing to note on this scenarios and all of the scenarios is this just takes into account our residential population. It doesn't necessarily account for a beautiful sunny day in Santa Monica where we have a beach full of tourists. The other thing is that the range is for a few different reasons, but there are significantly less impacts to casualties when it's a tele-tsunami and we have ample time to evacuate. A local tsunami, you have about 10 minutes. And especially for persons with access and functional needs or challenges evacuating by foot or bicycle, scooter, that could be a challenge. Okay, next is flooding. Our risk of coastal flooding or other normal types of flooding is minimal. And so we really are looking at the Stone Canyon Dam failure, which is up at the very top of the map in Bel Air. If that has this is the catastrophic dam failure scenario, so I just want to stress that. The flooding would stretch all the way to the marina and Mar Vista. So within Santa Monica, this shows the area of the eastern part of the city that would be impacted by flooding. It could be as the maximum depth of water could reach 12 feet, with it being significantly less the farther west you move. The thing to note is on this map, it doesn't show the impact to West LA. So from an evacuation standpoint, your evacuation directions are limited. You don't want to go into the flood zone. And we'd also be dealing with the entire West LA region evacuating. So it would be a massive response. But again, a worst case scenario, and they have done seismic modeling for this dam, thinking that it could sustain an 8.0 earthquake. This is the commercial building loss for this scenario. Same water levels. And then again, this is the HAZUS risk analysis for that area, about $56 million to $120 million in loss for building loss. Total economic loss of $227 million, but a displacement of 464 households. The evacuation time for this scenario is about an hour and a half. So it would result in a very widespread public safety response. Okay, so when we started this planning process, this was our wildfire map, where the very high hazard zone ended at the Santa Monica border, where we were really focusing that chapter on the things we deal with usually during wildfires: smoke, transportation issues, things of that nature, where Santa Monica is more in a support role. However, the Palisades fire occurred in January, where we have a new reality with wildfire from what we saw in Eden and Palisades, especially in extreme wind-driven events where wildfire isn't just a wildfire. It's no longer a wildland urban interface fire. It's now structure to structure. And so we were presented with a new reality where we needed to pivot on our chapter and our mitigation action items. The state came out with new fire maps after the Palisades fire This is the new map where Santa Monica is in the very high, and moderate hazard areas. The estimate from our crisis track data is that if all of these structures had damage, it could range from $60 to $660 million based on the tax assessor data. It is important to note that the northeastern section of the city does have a population that is older and more persons with disabilities, which could prove challenging during evacuation. Okay. We also looked at climate change hazards. Again, we've had many different storms, atmospheric rivers that have been occurring frequently, and so this is something, and we're having a lot of different disasters happening over and over and over again. And so this was an important element to include. In addition, with climate change, we looked at extreme weather events. One thing to note, it is very difficult to kind of capture the damage that climate change is doing in a financial term or a loss of life term. And it is dependent on our ability to reduce greenhouse gases. So one of the things that we looked at most carefully was this impact of sea level rise on our coastline and the impact that that could cause. So if the analysis that has been done shows that if sea level rise continues and is not, not cut back by 2100, it could total $847 million in losses for the city, based on pier impacts, beach impacts, and property damage. Okay, so that is the end of the bad news. Moving forward, briefly share what our mitigation action plan is, what we are going to do about this. So these are projects, plans, and activities that were proposed by the Resilience Planning Committee to address these items. We really tried to focus on what is tangible within a 5-year period. Where can we make our mark? We also understood that the city has limited financial resources, and so tried to look at our existing body of work or what we are planning to do and where can the work align. These are unfunded projects. So if they weren't already slated, then we will try our best to go for grant funding and things like that, but also be mindful that grant funding is a much more difficult scenario currently than it was last year. So yes, funding, grant instability, staff capacity to implement, regulatory hurdles, especially on the coastline, and then unforeseen events, similar to what we experienced with COVID. Okay, so for local planning, we categorize these mitigation action items. These are everything that we are hoping to do within the 5-year period. Water deconfliction planning, identifying immediate and long-term potable water services during disasters and how we prioritize water usage during emergencies. Evacuation plan and route evacuation plans, route plan, evaluating multimodal evacuation routes, and having a citywide evacuation plan for emergency events with special consideration for persons that don't have transportation or have an access or functional need. The next is Santa Monica Airport design, ensuring that we have, we're forward thinking in disaster planning as we prepare for the airport, both in our response capabilities, public safety, as well as incorporating resilient elements, sustainable elements. The next group was local assessment and regulations, ensuring that we're doing monitoring, inspecting the bluffs and our I-10 freeway slope for brush fire and slope instability, and taking action when we identify issues related to that. The next is red flag warning restrictions. This was a new one after the Palisades fire. Having restrictive measures when red flag warnings are implemented to enable first responders to actually respond, and then also putting restrictions on activities that could pose a fire ignition risk. Resilient city facility design standards. This would be creating a set of design standards for all new city construction where we are implementing best practices when it comes to preventing disaster, building risks and loss, maximizing post-disaster capabilities, and ensuring continuity of government operations. Hang in with me, there's only a couple more. Structure and infrastructure, looking at our water infrastructure system, identifying where are the points of vulnerability, especially where the water system crosses our Santa Monica fault line area, and how do we install different retrofit projects for older pipelines, making sure we are leaning in on that to reduce seismic vulnerability. Backup utilities at city facilities and other essential emergency community facilities, working to install solar plus storage, microgrids, and things to ensure we have electricity at those locations. Tsunami alerting system. We have implemented a small section of overhead paging at the Santa Monica Pier. We are testing it tomorrow for the shakeout drill. Hopefully everything works. So, but we want to see if we can make that more robust system for the pier or the coastline, and also look at other communication methods that would really be focused on tourists and making sure they evacuated promptly. And natural dune systems improvement, continuing to expand and maintain the natural dune beach restoration for both tsunami and climate change resilience. And then also continuing our community garden program, increasing food production grown and donated from those gardens to improve disaster food resiliency of the community. Education and awareness, ensuring that our emergency communications is multilingual and reaches all different types of populations within the city, looking at tourists and persons with access and functional needs specifically. Local wildland fire safety education. A lot of people don't know that we have these new fire hazard maps. And so educating that population in the northern part of the city, what it means, what are the new requirements living in that area, and how they can take action on that. And then finally, expanding critical emergency management technology, making sure we are using mapping, dashboards, other types of technology to the greatest extent, so we're making smart decisions during disaster response. Okay, so that is our 5-year plan. It is a hefty mission, but we have identified departments and stakeholders, or specific individuals who are responsible for that work. And then OEM is tasked with monitoring it annually, at least, to ensure that we're making progress, or we have a plan, or we understand what the barriers are to implementation, if there are any. Our approval timeline, we are shopping this plan around to commissions, and then we'll go to council in November. And then again, we will send this to Cal OES and FEMA for their approval or their edits. And then hopefully we will initiate that accessible plan design shortly after. And happy to take questions and feedback, and thank you for letting me present.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner Fresco?
First, I just wanted to make sure I understand that the idea behind this plan is not what we're going to do when the emergency happens, but how we're going to minimize our risk as much as we can in the interim, so that when that happens, we're not as vulnerable as we could be. Is that right?
That's perfect. That was a great explanation. Yes. So, so many times disasters happen to communities time and time again, where things are rebuilt and then the disaster occurs again, and then it's rebuilt the same way in the same place, etc. So this federal program was really designed to take a look at that and say, how can we incentivize doing things differently and baking in risk reduction strategies early on, and also post-disaster.
So how do we prepare? Well, first, I just wanted to point out, when I looked at those maps, you know, we do in our planning work, we look a lot at, I mean, we're all a high resource community, but there are lower resource areas. There are areas where people who are more vulnerable live, who are lower income and so forth. And it looked in all of those maps like they were targeting those areas. So that's just a thing to think about, and maybe you would want to look at those same maps that we looked at and notice that and think about targeting some of your work in those areas to prepare. That was just something I noticed.
No, that's an excellent point and something that we look at too. That's why we've layered the social vulnerability analysis on top of these maps. And that is why one of our strategies is to take this plan and turn it into something we can use as an education tool. Because we want to make sure people really have to have an understanding of the hazards in order to act. And so making sure we have that baseline understanding, and we do community outreach events to promote it, and then working with those communities to implement preparedness and mitigation measures.
So my last question, well, it's sort of two, but they're kind of related. One is, are there really things we can do to be more prepared when we do have millions of people at our beautiful beach, or, you know, when we are having a big tourist season again, God willing?
I think education is the best thing that we can do for these low frequency but high impact incidents, right? I originally come from Kansas. For people from Kansas, making sure they understand what a tsunami is and that they are in a tsunami zone, and that if there is an earthquake, they just need to get away from the ocean. Like those type of simple, tangible items, I think are achievable. And we have I will say we have great partnerships with like Santa Monica Travel and Tourism and things like that, where we can really leverage those partnerships to drive that messaging forward.
And my last question is, God forbid we should have the Stone Canyon rupture, and not only will so much area be inundated with water, but Santa Monica would be inundated with people. And are there ways we can be prepared for that?
So there are a couple ways. One is, in the plan, we didn't address the Stone Canyon Dam inundation in the last hazard mitigation plan. So this was really an opportunity for all of the city staff to be like, oh, this is a big deal, even though it is a low frequency. Like, hopefully it won't happen. But
I Googled it and it said it never happened.
right, which we want to believe. But making sure that we incorporate that hazard into our evacuation planning. We're building out evacuation zones and making sure that we build zones that are mindful of that inundation area so we can quickly implement those. And people know I live in this zone. Making sure we do education in that specific area. So I think there are those types of actions, as well as when we look at the airport design. That is outside of the inundation zone. But can we turn facilities into shelters? We have a very limited capability to turn city structures, city facilities into public shelters right now. We are very dependent on the school district. And so that could be an opportunity.
Okay, and just so you all know, I did send in some of notes, of course, on the history section in the thing, because I always do that. So, just
We appreciate that very much.
sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wasserman?
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks for the presentation as well, Lindsay. So first I was wondering, I guess the biggest hazard that stuck out to me is not at least having its own big chapter heading was, I don't want to say routine air quality issues, but severe air days not caused by wildfires or not caused by immediate wildfires. I imagine a lot of the mitigation measures would be similar, but I guess from the plan, from other work that your department is doing, what mitigation steps are being taken about severe air days?
So with the FEMA plan, it really stresses looking at natural disaster hazard events. And so air quality on what we call a blue sky day when there's not a wildfire occurring or not a natural hazard wasn't necessarily a part of our planning process. But I'm a master of public health, so I understand very well that air quality plays a tremendous role in the morbidity of our population, especially children, asthma rates, those types of things. So a lot of the measures of high-risk populations, understanding their risk based on where they live, also promoting things where we're reducing emissions, we're reducing that pollution, and then where to get that information when we have days where the air quality is poor, taking actions to reduce personal risk.
Great. And then I don't want to say worst case scenario. There's a lot of worst case scenarios in this report. But thinking about any of these events happening during a mega event, the Olympics, the World Cup, what kind of planning, mitigation ahead of time is going into that work?
So it is happening. There are a lot of different committees looking at a lot of different things related to contingency planning, and the role that LA County, LA City, and then the jurisdictions who don't have games, how we are all cooperating and participating in that. More to come. I think right now they're trying to figure out the final venue cities list, but that will be a hot topic in the years coming up.
Great. A quick question. You mentioned there was a public survey. Was that just a survey open to everybody, or was there some statistical sampling method?
No, it was just an opt-in survey, no budget survey, where we posted it online as well as the public library so people could do it in person, and in English and Spanish, trying to get as much feedback as possible.
There were various sections that mentioned the role of transit, or just generally people who don't have cars, how they're going to evacuate. So I was glad to see that throughout the different sections of the report. I guess, what plans do you have to get out the word now? Like, oh, a bus will come. Where do you go? What number do you call if you don't have a car to get out of the way of a fire or tsunami or something like that?
No, absolutely. So, for example, in Palisades Fire, we set up big blue buses with different stops, and we actually did door-to-door pickup in certain situations where we have implemented that before. We have a robust presence from our transportation team in our emergency operations center plan, both on the mobility side and the big blue bus side, where we can come together and figure out those plans. But we have implemented that in the past. I think the mitigation action item is that we want to do more. And there's also challenges with transporting people by bus if they use a wheelchair or they have different access and functional needs. And so really diving into those challenges and seeing what we can do and how we can best educate that population. One other two other quick notes. There's a really great program that Santa Monica Fire has implemented where folks with different access and functional needs or pets or businesses can upload their information into a system so firefighters have it ready to go. And then the other thing is, in a tsunami, we do not want you to evacuate by bus. Unless it's a tele-tsunami, if it's an earthquake, we want you to go. Scooter or bicycle are very appropriate, but by foot is fine too. And then we would assist in trying to figure out if there are persons that can't evacuate that way, how to get them out. But we don't want you waiting for a bus.
Great.
Yeah, just to clarify.
And then the last thing I was wondering, so the kind of list you had of the mitigation measures, I think PD was only mentioned once. I mean, I think about, like, during Katrina, New Orleans PD is very different than SMPD, but the distrust that it had with the community, and it definitely hampered disaster response efforts. I guess what kind of work is being done with PD, not just to prepare for the stuff that you have to do in a disaster, but like community trust during a disaster? Is there some sort of non-sworn people who can do the same work, things like that?
So typically in a disaster, police has a very specific role. So they're tasked with evacuations and getting folks out and doing mandatory evacuations, traffic management, but not necessarily the community trust. We have the American Red Cross, we have Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, who serve as our friendly faces in disasters, right, to have people come take shelter, connect people with different needs that they have, setting them up on the road to recovery, but it's usually not sworn law enforcement.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you for your presentation. Can you explain to me why we wouldn't, when we're looking at this, why we wouldn't include the potential tourists and out-of-town people we have here? Because it's very likely that they will be here.
We mentioned that we would include that in our response plans. It was just stating that in HAZUS, you put in your specific demographics within Santa Monica, like you select your jurisdiction and then the different statistics. There is not a
metric for that.
tourist
So
for-
okay,
yeah,
so
and
I guess I missed that you would plan for that. It just wasn't part of that.
Correct.
Just wasn't represented.
Yeah, it's just not
Okay.
represented in the data.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Then looking at table 4.5 and the hazard mitigation actions, the constraints, there's two that keep coming up. And one of them is funding and the other is staffing. And it's almost in every one of these. How do we, and we're still going to meet all these timelines?
So I think the work is divided amongst different divisions, and I was very straightforward with departments that we should only select mitigation action items that were realistic and achievable to our best ability. But you're talking just, my acronym is on there a lot, and I'm a team of one currently as emergency manager. And so I understand that very well. How we resource this, I think, is a question above my pay grade, and that how do we best implement hazard mitigation as a standard of city practice, and we incorporate it and build it into our culture of what we do and incorporate it into our existing work is a starting point.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess I just kind of wanted to say that out loud so that it was pretty, nobody's being fooled that this is going to be an easy task and that we have these resources and these are important things that, we have so many important things in front of us, but this is something we have to keep up there as well.
I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Liznit. I also have a couple of questions, but I did want to thank you for the presentation. As a new resident of Santa Monica, it was definitely very educational for me, and I appreciate it. It's sort of a little bit of a wake-up call, but also good to be aware of the magnitude of these issues, so I appreciate that. A couple of quick clarifications on the slide that speaks to the Stone Creek flood scenario. It's not evident from the map, but am I right in assuming that I-10 would be significantly impacted by that event as well?
So there are areas where there's flooding over the freeway, but for the most part, the freeway is raised to where the flooding would not impact the roadway. Now, the integrity of the area, you know, it's like if an overpass goes down, the entire freeway is impacted. So, so there could be sections that are impacted, and I see that on the map, but not the entire roadway.
I see.
The 405, however, is severely impacted.
On the map that shows the wildfire hazard, it's the first map I think you have. I was just curious about the red dots on that map. What do they call out?
Those are our fire stations.
I see. Okay, great.
Just to
Yes.
why that's important. So there is one of the things that the fire department looks at is their placement of fire stations. And currently there's not one in the northern section of the city where the highest fire risk is. So that's an important element for their planning as they move forward.
The more general question I have is you touched on the importance of education as a key focus, and I'm just curious about how schools and children factor into that question in a constructive manner without necessarily scaring people too much.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. I'll highlight one program I'm closely involved in is that Grant Elementary School does a project-based learning activity for the entire school year on the 3rd grade class. They learn about natural hazards. They create their own mitigation action items pretty much, and they can be a little wild, but they have their own design. They create dioramas and different displays to show those designs. I participate by answering the students' questions. They do interviews of me to learn more about hazards. And so that's a great example that we're hoping to highlight in that magazine-style document where it's getting the family involved, right? It's a non-threatening way to learn about natural disasters, learn about hazards. It gives a feeling of empowerment to a child that you can do something about it. And it also helps educate the family on preparedness actions that they could take. And maybe they should be taking it more seriously.
Great, thank you.
I have one other question.
Commissioner Fresco.
I was just thinking, when we recently looked at the new park master plan and we were talking about using parkways for like food-bearing trees, did you have something to do with that?
I did not.
No? Oh, well, maybe you should talk.
Sounds delicious.
It does, and it's part of your plan too, so maybe you should talk to those guys.
Perfect. Yes, we could incorporate that where it adds that element of resilience.
Right, just like in making parkways more like Olympic Boulevard, to make it a more amenable place for use as a park space, to add trees that give shade or food.
Yeah, I think one of the goals of the resilient design mitigation action item is that so often we implement a park or a building or a project, and then a year afterwards we say, oh, I wish we would have done that, or it would have been so nice to use it for that too. And facilitating a process and to make sure we're incorporating the subject matter experts of all city departments when we're working on design and creating those standards in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I take it there's no public input on this? Am I mistaken? All right. Yes.
they don't, so I had to learn about them when I lived here.
Do they have two
I am an
tornadoes?
expert in tornadoes, yeah. And bioterrorism events, but that's for another day.
Is there any further discussion of the commission?
We need to hear about biotech.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And when you make your magazine, you should use the same designer who made this report. It was very attractive.
Perfect. Thank you. It will not be me. I was the one who did that, yeah, and we'll find a professional, but yes, thank you.
All right, with that, I'll close the study session. And I believe the next item then is item 14. Commissioner Wasserman, would you like
Yeah,
to
I'll just
talk
keep
about it?
sharing fun articles. We talked about streets and what they could be used for other than just driving last meeting in the parks plan. And so there's a little short brief from a colleague at UCLA trying to quantify how much value there is in our overwide streets and what else we could do with it. So take a look. It's printed over there.
Thank you.
No, I just have to say that I read your article before I read some of this documentation, and I thought, maybe we shouldn't narrow the streets so that the emergency vehicles can go through. So it's kind of a,
We make smaller fire trucks. They have them
Right.
in Asia.
right, well, I have one, there's Bay Street, which I take every time I come home from City Hall, is one of those narrow streets where you have to take turns to pass. And that, it's a thing to think about, that's all.
Thank you. So with that, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.